I'm Teba Diatta, I'm 26 and I run my own charity known as Running for Life, which raises money for an education centre in Senegal. I grew up in York, but I'm half Senegalese. My dad comes from Senegal, obviously. My mum met him out there when she was a missionary in the late 1970s. They came back over here and I was born, and I've lived here ever since. I was brought up in a Christian household, so I've always known about God, but there's times when I wasn't really that into it, and I was at school, I just wanted to be a normal teenager, and sometimes I found it a bit annoying that I had to go to church, so I kind of rebelled a bit and stopped going in my teens. But I've come back round, I came back round, experienced a bit of the world, but I've always come back and I've known that God is real and there's more to life than just materialism and partying and stuff like that. God to me is like the essence of my life and my rock and my pillar of strength. I've not always found life easy because me and my brother were pretty much the only black people in the school, so we used to get the odd bit of racism. And also when you're a teenager you want to be the same as everyone else, have the same fashions and look the same, and that wasn't always possible for me because I had a frizzy afro and dark skin and stuff, so you know I did suffer a bit with that, but you know, now I'm happy to be different and I'm glad that God's made me a bit different. Before I went to uni and into my later teens, I started going to church and developing my relationship with God, and you know, I found that I couldn't just sit on the fence and kind of take the mick out of God, so to speak, by recommitting myself and then coming back, and it sort of God, like, it was more embedded into my life, and I realised I had to be more, you know, serious about if God was who he said he was, or Jesus actually died on a cross to save me from sin, then the least I could do was like show it and reflect that through the way I was living. After I did my A-levels, I decided I wanted to do something different, and I actually went and did a gap year in Senegal and went to live with long-lost relatives, and it completely changed my life. I experienced living in poverty, you know, not having any running water, having to have a bath and a shower with a bucket of water and a tin can, and I actually was like so changed and moved by living with some of the world's poorest people. It inspired me to set up my own charity, which I mentioned, Running for Life. And you know, we raise money, we do running events and non-uniform days in school, and all the money goes back out to Senegal. And our first pioneer project is actually building an education centre and a library for kids who live in villages where there's no electricity, so it's ultimately going to help kids get an education and hopefully liberate people living out in Senegal. Actually living in a community where there are maybe 18 people in a house actually made me realise that that was more like the kind of life that people in the Bible lived together in a community. And it's not all about iPods and mega TVs and all these luxuries and things. It's about being genuine and caring for people and loving your neighbour as yourself. And I learned that, and I actually saw it from the little kids, like 3-4-year-olds. They'd share their sweets and their apples and things with you, and they'd always offer you first and take the last smallest bit for themselves, and that was like quite humbling, seeing kids living like that. And you know, I was a 20-year-old woman and I was a bit, you know, self-centered, and that taught me so much about, you know, trying not to put myself first, and seeing it from kids really brought home a few truths about what I was like. Being a Christian hasn't always been easy, and it's not like I had this route to Damascus life-changing experience, like one day I believed and next I didn't. So I'd almost say it's like being on a roller coaster, or it has been. I've had my highs and my lows, but I've always like come back to God, and I've always known that God is there, and even when I've done things that are wrong or whatever, like God's been looking after me and looking out for me, and still loved me the same as when I was following him and when I wasn't. So that is like really reassuring, and it's comforting to know that he's like a real father who will love you. His love's unconditional.